Here we are, new platform. Here we go. This is exciting, isn't it?
It is exciting. Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Roshelle Weir. I am the Resident Chief Enabler for Decider, the company behind Switch for Schools, and I am joined by our resident agitator, Phil Slade, a behavioural economist and psychologist. Yeah. And today we are here to talk all about emotional intelligence. So, before we get into it, of course, there's always housekeeping, as you would expect. So love to any questions that you've got throughout the session, please feel free to drop them into the chat channel and send them through, and we will either respond to them through the webinar, or we will reply in the chat. So wanted to thank you all. If you want, you've got 45 minutes here. We want to try and allow some time for Q&A, so we'll see how we go. Really looking forward to going through this content with you. And so let's just start to talk about what we're going to cover today.
Let's get into
it. So in this session, we want to look at sort of 4 key components. We want to understand the neuroscience behind the way we act and feel, and explore ways that you can use this insight to master your reactivity. So we're going to look at emotional intelligence, what it is and why it's important. We're going to look at the language of emotion, but looking to expand your vocabulary and to be more articulate about your emotions. We want to have a bit of a chat about emotion and how it works with empathy, and identifying what it looks and feels like, and how you can start to spot it in others, which is absolutely a superpower when it comes to emotional intelligence. And the other one is about managing reactivity. So learning how to dial up and dial down your emotions to be fit for purpose and suit the situation that you find yourself in, and be able to leverage it and use it to your advantage. Sounds exciting.
Sounds good. Let's get into it.
Let's do this. So let's kick off with a bit of 101.
Emotional intelligence. So when we talk about emotional intelligence, what is it? And this is what we're going to explore a little bit, but understand that it's all about managing and understanding emotion. That's what it is, first in yourself, and then in others, and in looking at the social interactions of emotions. But we can sort of say that, and that makes sense. But really, we want to have a look at the science of this. Is this just a thing that's made up? It's like, is there really EQ and IQ? So anyway, let's go to an experiment. And this experiment, it wasn't in Australia. We're in Australia, but we're actually going to start in New Zealand. That's right. So in New Zealand, they've got more than just pretty coastline and, hobbits and the rugby players, right? They've got a good rugby team, and definitely more than 1,000 odd ways to kill yourself, right? They've actually got these guys, and these guys are part of a study that started way down the bottom of New Zealand there in Dunedin, and they took 1,000 Dunedin residents at about age 4. So there's an example in there in the early 70s of where they started to test these kids over time. And what they wanted to do, and they took, all socially, very socially diverse community, all sorts of socioeconomic statuses. It was a really broad range of things. And over the last 60 years, this study is still going with more than 970 of the original participants, right? It's nuts. The data that they've got is fantastic. And they really wanted to understand, amongst other things, what predictors are there of success. Could you have a look at a 4-year-old and predict that they're going to be the next prime minister or the president or the next criminal mastermind? So what they found was really, really interesting. So in the 90s, after about 20, 30 years of research and tracking these people over time, looking at everything from their physical health to everything, and they had this hypothesis, like we all do, that maybe IQ or socioeconomic status or grades or their gender or their religion or where they went to school or if they played an instrument. It turns out none of these things had any influence on success with their finances or social success, right? It was only emotional intelligence, the ability to understand and manage your emotions. So at around the same time that this study was kicking off, a couple of guys over in Israel started to look at behavioral economics, and they were looking at taking a lot of the principles of economics and seeing how that affects our decision making. And what they found was that we have 2 systems of processing information, and this is really integral to understanding and starting to understand the part of your emotions and how they affect you. So what they found was that System 1 was named System 1 because it's the primal way that parts of the brain that get developed. So System 1, you'll see in there's a little blue dot there. That's your amygdala. That's a really important thing. You see how deep it is inside your brain? That is what they call the fear center. So often when you're trying to react or you've got a very strong emotion, it actually comes from this little part of the brain here, and it's linked to your hippocampus, which you see under here in the gray, and your brain stem, and those very primal parts of the brain that get developed first in the womb. Also, that they think evolved over time first. So that's why they call it System 1. It's the first system that gets developed, right? And this provides a certain way of thinking when you think about memory and emotion, all those sorts of things, and survival. System 2 is the sort of the stuff that grows over the top, the front part of your brain, in particular, the frontal lobe cortex. So we've found that that this is where planning and your ability as humans to think ahead and predict the future and problem solve in really unique ways, and where we think a lot of some of the empathy may be sitting in mirror neurons and things like that. So this is System 2. It's a much more conscious system. System 1 very much is reactive. It doesn't take in a lot of information, makes very quick decisions in order to help us survive. System 2 is more considered. It's the things that happen where things are more novel. So that's System 1. It's fast, jumps to conclusions. It's often, behavioral economists will often describe it as a purpose-built machine to jump to conclusions, right? And those, if you think about it, it's emotion and experience. It's linked to your memories, right? So as you learn over time, do this, it has this outcome, do this, that has this outcome. Particularly if it's a negative outcome, you start to avoid negative outcomes. Now, this might be all great in the fields of Africa or when as primals, whatever, but it's not great in modern life, because often the things we learn up until we're 12 actually don't translate that well into the new system, the new economy, the way that we work today. So it's all about how do we look at this reactive system and how do we manage and understand this reactive system. And this reactive system is intuitively linked with our emotion, and it has a huge impact on our rational thinking, right? It's just that it's unconscious, right? We can't see it. This is why it's important to understand and manage it. We often think of this reactive side of the brain as the ape, and that's because evolutionarily it was the first to evolve. But also we can see these parts of the brain in chimpanzees, and so it's just kind of a nice little shorthand. And kind of colloquially, when we talk about going ape shit, it's like our emotions or our ape has come out, usually to protect us because we feel under threat, and our rational state is the one that's trying to keep the cage on the animal. So this is you trying to tame the ape all the time. And it's this fight between you and the ape that is often the core central concept to this idea of emotional intelligence. And when we think about ape, we think about it like this, like it's kind of like our personality. It's kind of, we're likable. They like the ape, right? The problem is that no one sees the ape when it's like this. They usually see the ape when it's like this, when it's coming out, when it's aggressive, when it's trying to attack something that's threatening you at the time, or makes you feel sad, or makes you feel anxious, or all these sorts of things. They're all linked to this very internal part of the brain. So you just need to remember that ape, it's about threat. It's responding to potential threats in the environment. And this, your sort of more conscious state is all about how you thrive. So you can imagine that the ape can be really handy. It can be really, really good. And we often talk about your ape, your emotional center is actually your superpower. When they say, what superpower would you like? And people usually say, invisible or flying, right? They're the two big ones. Well, we actually have a superpower that is unlike any other in the animal kingdom, because we have these two systems that are working together. And if we can get, our superpower is to get our threat state and our thrive state working together in order to succeed in life and become a bit more successful at life. And when we often do this, people go, now I have to control the ape. It's about eradicating the ape. It's about getting rid of the ape. And it's like, no, you've got that. It actually helps you. Emotions can help you. They're there for a reason. It's just about directing that energy in the right place at the right time, at the right level of intensity. And this is the heart of understanding and managing emotion. A good way to sort of think about this is often to do the handbrain. So the handbrain just goes, the amygdala, that little blue dot that was on the screen before, that's like your thumb. And as you fold your fingers over your thumb, that's like your frontal cortex, your system 2. So the thumb is like system 1 and system 2, and you can sort of see it looks like a cage, right? So my four fingers it's got a caging my ape. When you might get to the end of the day, in the morning you've got a really strong cage. It's like I'm going on a diet. I've done my exercise in the morning. I'm in control of things, but the day's pretty long, and you start to get tired, and somebody says, "Oh, do you want a burger and a beer?" And or you come home and there's a piece of chocolate cake in the fridge, and your sort of system 2 starting to flail, and your ape starts to come out, or someone says something to you that really annoys you, and you just explode unnecessarily. It's because you've got no more energy to cage your ape, and your ape just goes ape shit, right? So this is about how do we maintain that cage on the ape, and this is the hand brain. This is kind of a nice way, but while we're talking about the body, it might be good. That's what's happening inside the brain. But Shell, what's happening inside the body?
Absolutely, and this is really interesting because emotion. As you said, like your ape is a habitual tool for you. So it's learnt habits over time, and we're talking over hundreds and thousands of years over time. And we've got some deep-seated responses to certain stimulus that come into us. And being emotionally intelligent is being able to understand and know what that feels like. So, and being able to label it. But there are some really, really obvious cues in terms of what those emotions look like and feel like and sound like. So we're going to go through a few of the big ticket ones. So when you think about anger, so you can, like we've all talked about the fight and flight response, right? So, so if something triggers you can imagine back in the day, a lion comes and you have this response. So your body goes, oh, there's a threat. Okay, I need to prepare this body to respond. So it's about going, all right, I'm going to give you a big hit of adrenaline. I'm going to give you this, superpower. It's like on turbo nitrous in a car. You're going to get this big hit of these chemicals, these go fast chemicals, and now we'll redirect blood flow to the parts of your body that need it. So when you're in an anger state, it's around going, to your hands so that you can respond and fight your way out of it. And then in a fear state, it could be like to your legs so that you can run away or that type of thing. And it's about, we're going to increase blood flow to the brain so that you can scan and be more vigilant about the threat that's about us and you can respond accordingly. It is super, super, super exciting. But obviously the threats that we have in modern society have changed somewhat. So there is a little bit about, well, how do we better manage and use that adrenaline to our advantage? In terms of like in yourself, I don't know if you've ever has seen Paul Ekman Group's work and that, or if you've ever watched the show
Lie to Me
show. This around, we have these expressions that are typical representative of emotion. So this is great for yourself, but also when you're working with people around you to try and observe those those evidence of these emotions in their body. So even when people are trying to use their frontal cortex, we talk about leaking. So sometimes you'll see micro expressions and some of these signs will come through and you'll get a sense, okay, something I've said there has made them angry or I've scared them. So you'll see things like that frowning, the brows come together, but the eyes are open and, but you also will hear it in terms of the change in pitch. Obviously, if they're yelling at you, that's a fairly obvious sign that something's going on. But there was also, you will know yourself that we talk about, that you're seeing red, that you feel hot. This is that blood flow we were talking about. And you might also see the body. So you're starting to make yourself feel, big, because this is about, if I'm going to fight that lion, like it's about I'm here, I'm present, the chin's jutted out, and that's, it's a very open stance. As opposed to fear, where you can see it's more of a downward, the mouth is open, but the eyes are open. And this is because your body is saying, oh, there's a threat. We need to take in as much information as we can. So we want to open up our eyes as wide as we can to get as much light and all its stimulus in so you can assess that threat. But you also see that you'll get that shortness of breath. Again, we're redirecting the blood flow to other parts of your body and preparing you for fight or flight.
So when you say, I'm fine, that's you being
it
American.
Might be a sign, but maybe you're not. And let's be honest, fine's never.
No. And when you do that, the worst thing I can do is to say, no, you're not. You're angry. Well, now I am.
we may have had that conversation. Oh, good. The interesting thing about anxiety and excitement is physiologically they often feel very, very similar. So this is Phil gave me a great tip many years ago. Is I have a fear of public speaking. You probably wouldn't know it from what I'm doing now, and because you worked with me. There you go. There's a correlation.
Winning.
Yeah, winning. So there is a thing about being able to rechange that narrative you have, because anxiety and excitement often do feel very, very similar. Because you have that increased breathing and your heart rate goes up, but there's also interestingly a lot of blood flow being directed to your brain so that you can respond to whatever the threat is. You're anticipating an intense situation. So there's this, again, you've got this adrenaline, but you've also got cortisol and some of these other really important body chemicals being sent through the body to the parts of your body ready to respond. But I did want to call out that, this is fine in a short spurt, but be conscious that over time, if it gets too intense, if you extend it, you can get into a danger zone, and particularly excitement. If you are overstimulated for too long, you might find yourself actually starting to get lightheaded and nauseous because of that redirection of blood flow. But, some of the things that you might be feeling in this space, you might start to feel sick to your stomach. We talk about those butterflies, but you might start to get nauseous. That's, again, because of the redirection of that blood flow, headaches, insomnia, trouble sleeping, feeling, this takes a lot of energy to be in this heightened state. So you might find yourself feeling, high levels of fatigue, as well as sweating and trembling. So all of that blood flow into your extremities starts to come out in that sort of physiologically, which might even lend towards fatigue in your muscles. So you'll start to feel sore and pain. So, prolonged anxiety and either excitement, either of these, if for a long period of time, is actually not too great for your body.
You can sort of see these stories of people at concerts, and they're waiting for the artist, and they get so excited that they pass out and they miss the concert. Right? It's what's happening here, and I think and it's as you said, that ability to go, am I nervous? And go, no, I'm just full of anticipation. And being able to, in that mind, it's like when you look at athletes, high-performing athletes, you often hear them say, are you nervous about the race that's coming up? They go, no, I just can't wait for it. I'm excited, and so they're doing that switch so that their brain doesn't treat their feelings of anxiety or nervousness or fear as fear. It's as excitement. But it's very sort of nice little trick.
Surprise and disgust I find fascinating, actually, because of the story behind it. Those we talked about evolutionary, some of those habitual behaviors that are ingrained in us. So when what surprise face looks like, it's like, and so this is about opening up. And as I said, like a little bit before, like this is about how do I get as much information, and so even the intake of breath and opening the mouth. This is around going, I need to see it, smell it, see everything, what's going on, so that I can make a decision about what's happening in this space. But did you know that when you are surprised, you actually freeze for 1/25th of a second? So that is actually a thing. It is, all humans do that, and only humans do that, which I find totally fascinating. And in disgust, the opposite. So rather than opening up your face, you're trying to shut it down because you're trying to stop that repulsive thing getting in. So you're trying to shut your nose down and close your mouth, you purse your lips. This is about trying to expel poison or, turn away from whatever it is that you are finding non-palatable.
And the good thing about these two is they're very momentary emotions,
Correct.
Like anger, anxiety, sadness, happen. They're all very long, what I call long form emotions. These happen instantly. And often straight after these, you'll get one of these next emotions.
Well, you see, just when in terms of if you're trying to see, as I said, you'll see this in people around you as well. So you'll also be having a look for the things that you're from a physiological perspective, is they're posing. So if someone's surprised, you'll often see them sort of retreat, whereas when disgust, that retreat looks more like moving away from. So it'll be that kind of, you can't really see me, I'm in the room. It's like that kind of, yuck. But as opposed to surprise, which is more like a retreat. So you can start to see and differentiate some of the responses people have and yourself. And it's really, really, really important to be self-aware of how your body's reacting so that you can get some cues into what emotion you're feeling.
And that's why you can be disgusted at people, right? Because there are some people that you think are almost like poison, It's like, I don't want that person around me, or I don't want to vote for that person, politically or something like that. Your body sort of has this reaction I don't want, no, why would I vote? Why would I like
and you might even
person?
start to feel sick to the stomach. It's like, oh, I just can't. But happy is a wonderful thing. Happy releases some great inhibitors to some of those chemical reactions that we were talking about, because this is the recovery emotion. So, it is when you get scared, often you start to laugh. That's your body's way of going, oh, we're all good, and let's recalibrate our body back into the place. It's really, really fascinating how our body is just so clever at being able to regulate these effectively.
I had an accident in the car with my brother when I was about 19. And on the freeway, we did like a couple of spins on the freeway as I was learning to drive. I sat there and it was so shocked that I started giggling incessantly. My brother didn't have the same reaction. He didn't appreciate that. But it was like that was my body trying to calm down from this hyper moment of extreme emotion, and laughter was actually me self-regulating. My brother, he went straight to anger. That was different. But anyway, that's not the point.
Call, each to their own. We all deal with things in different ways. And sadness is around slowing your body down. So your body will be really, really effective at giving you time to heal. That's what we're not trying to make sadness or anger, any of these emotions they all have their time and place, and our bodies are set up habitually to do what it needs to do to react in those moments. I do love the concept of, smile for a photo. You can actually tell if a smile is genuine, usually by the wrinkles around the eyes. So when you talk about, are they smiling with their eyes? So you can see that relaxed posture, and it's around opening up, often smiling with teeth. And as I said, just looking for those wrinkles, then we'll know. And people have deep-seated ones, maybe they're very happy people because they've got ingrained happy lines, which is wonderful.
I'm finding as I'm getting older, I must be getting happier. I'm getting more.
Yeah, sure. That's what it is. That's totally what it is. And in sadness, obviously, it's that drooping and the kind of everything. Sort of the posture was obviously be sadder and lower, but also interestingly, the tone of voice will drop. So you'll see in a happy versus sad, you can absolutely see the difference on those two extremes. Fascinating, absolutely fascinating.
Yes, I mean, and understanding those visual cues often with people that are sort of on the spectrum a little bit, because ASD and things like that are diagnosed based on behaviors, and often it's just that the normal learning routes that we have when we're trying to learn emotions and learn interactivity, if you don't learn in that sort of way, that face-to-face way, you've got to learn other ways to learn it, and there are ways that we can do that, and we're going to go into that because when we work with kids in particular, they can actually start to understand and manage in just a slightly different way their emotions. And when they do, their academic scores go up. And this is a really fascinating study by a friend of mine, Arthur Poropat, who I actually studied under when I was doing my Master's of Psychology at Griffith University. And they took 1,000 students to have a look at what the impact of personality was on academic scores. And what they found, almost by accident, was that understanding emotion and managing emotions had a much bigger correlative predictive power on academic performance than even IQ. So intelligence was less. How smart you were was not as important as how high your EQ was, right? And what I find interesting here is that emotional stability, right down the bottom. So how stable you were didn't matter, because if you could understand and manage those emotions, it mitigated for that anyway. The interesting thing that the McCall et al. 10 years later replicated this study, different kids, different teachers, different experimenters, and found exactly the same thing. And I think that's really fascinating, but it really rams home that this stuff isn't just about interesting. This is about how do you apply this in life every day. And this is where we start going into managing emotions. And the way that we manage it, we need to get a language of emotion, right? Because language is the conceptual vessel. By having different words for different things and being able to put things in different boxes helps us start to manage and sort and give some sort of a conceptual framework for being able to deal with it. So when we talk about emotion, it makes a bit more sense when we can start to break. Emotion, where did it come from? Well, it came from this word mater, the Latin, which was the troop. Romans used to use it for troop movement as they're moving troops. So it has this motion element of it. It has to be in a movement. And E is like X, so it's got you're moving away from, right? It's moving away. And when they started to talk about passions and sentiments and affections, speaking of a word, like they needed a word, catch-all word, so they could think about how to look at these things that were internal movers, something that was moving people on the inside, not just as an external movement. So the French came up with this term, mouveur, which is, I don't even know, I think that's how they said it. But anyway, which translated into emotion, and it's a conceptual vessel for all of those things that move us inside, and I find that quite fascinating. And if you've seen The Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, this is a great film. But Fred Rogers, who is, for anyone that grew up in America, which we didn't, but that they would understand this, and he was very much a fan of if it's mentionable, it's manageable. And this feeds into this concept of if you've got a word for it, if you can articulate it, then you can start to manage it, right? So this is really important. And the science backs this up. So this is a study where people before meetings or before the day or before when they did the study were just literally saying very specifically what emotions they were feeling. And they found that the brain capacity increased by about 20%. So you had 20% more brain capacity that was otherwise being used to suppress those emotions or to try to hide them. So just by labeling it helped you manage it. And the brain went, oh, okay, you've got this. I don't need to put my energy to that. So it's actually like we can test this. We can see this in an MRI. It's not just sort of fancy stuff. So this is why emotion wheels and stuff can be so important, because it's starting to put language on emotion. But just saying that you're happy, anxious, angry, sad, which for some people is more than just, well, I'm fine, I'm okay, or I'm tired, that's even worse. But that's step one, because you've really got to then look a little bit deeper and go, well, what are the words that sit within each of these categories? Because intensity of emotion is just as important as being able to articulate emotion. So what are the words? So this is our emotion wheel. If you're going to screenshot anything, screenshot this, right? Because often people go, well, I'm annoyed, which is actually a light form of anger. Like even knowing that being annoyed is actually being angry, right? It's just a low level of anger. But rather than saying I'm really annoyed, that sort of doesn't say much. You should be able to say I'm frustrated, which instantly gives the other person a higher state of anger. Or if you say I'm fuming, instantly you're saying that you're more angry than frustrated and obviously furious. And if you're ecstatic or overwhelmed, furious, depressed, terrified, or hyperactive, you're not thinking. Your ape is taken over. That's when you flipped your lid and your ape is running the show. Even that next put out, pumped, sensational, panicking, fuming, miserable, and afraid. You still sort of don't have control. You only have control towards the outer ends of this spectrum, which is sort of nervous as opposed to terrified. Feeling hurt is very different from being overwhelmed. So this is really important as a scale. And we're going to go through this scale in a minute. But we need to put a pin in that scale. We're going to come back to emotions in a minute, because as we put a pin in it, we can't talk about emotional intelligence and managing our own emotions and emotions and others without talking about empathy. And empathy is this ability for you to be able to connect with how someone else is feeling based on the feedback that you're getting from that person. And even if you can see that emotion, what you do with that emotion is quite another thing. I think Brené Brown has got a great video on, it's not about being sympathetic. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy drives connection, because it's not I'm feeling for you, it's more I'm feeling with you. And there's a great little video that we're going to show now on empathy that comes from the Pixar film. What's the name of the film called again? Inside Out. And I think that if you haven't seen this film, see this film. It'll change the way that you start to look at emotion. So here's a little clip.
The Stuffed Animal Hall of Fame! My rocket! Wait, Riley and I were still using that rocket. It still has some song power left. Who's your friend who likes to play? No, you can't take my rocket to the top. Riley and I are going to the moon. Riley can't be done with me.
Hey, it's gonna be okay. We can fix this. We just need to get back to headquarters. Which way to the train station?
I had a whole trip planned for us.
Hey, who's ticklish, huh? Here comes the tickle monster. Hey, Bing Bong, look at this. Oh, here's a fun game. You point to the train station and we all go there. Won't that be fun? Come on, let's go to the train station.
I'm sorry they took your rocket. They took something that you loved. It's gone. Forever.
Sadness. Don't make him feel worse.
Sorry.
It's all he had left of Riley.
I bet you and Riley had great adventures.
Oh, they were wonderful. Once we flew back in time, we had breakfast twice that day.
Sadness.
It sounds amazing. I bet Riley liked it.
Oh, she did. We were best friends.
Yeah, it's sad.
I'm okay now. Come on. The train station is this way.
How did you do that?
I don't know. He was sad, so I listened to what...
Hey! There's the train!
I love that that little video clip, and I think the reason that I really love that clip is that it's a great example of how to feel with someone when you're talking about different emotions. And in that case, it was sadness, it was grief. You know, having sadness, you know, come up beside and just feeling sad with them. You know, a lesser form. You know, obviously wasn't as emotionally distraught, but was just a little bit sad, right? And that allowed there to be a connection, allowed the other person to feel heard. And with a lot of emotions, and a lot with when people are wanting to be empathetic with someone else, it is all about hearing the other person. And you hear the other person not by you know, if I see that somebody's really sad, you don't say, "Oh, I see you're really sad." It's actually about going, that must be, you know,
I understand why you're sad.
yeah, and I feel that. I feel that this would make you feel that way, but it's a lower level. So we're going to go through levels of sadness and the importance of the intensity, because I think understanding language and intensity of emotions is the game changer. But in order to be able to have empathy, this is kind of the counterintuitive thing. It kind of starts with you. You've got to master your own emotional state. You've got to find that ability to be able to find peace within yourself before you can look at being effective with other people when they're in that emotional state. Because even you can see it, it'll just be too hard. You'll be so intent on controlling your own emotions, or conscious of how that other person thinks of you, rather than just being present and being with this person. So you've got to, it all starts with you. And so, yeah, I think we struggle in life, I think, to you know, we don't want to talk about emotions because we're so busy. And even things like we're in the pursuit of meaningfulness without even realizing that you already are, you know, and that's sort of internal realization is so important. So start with you, extend out to others, and then change the world. This is the kind of counterintuitive thing. And we often want to change the world and then make sure that everyone else is okay, and make sure and look after everyone else, and then we get sort of the leftovers. And it needs to be the other way around. Otherwise, you're going to be no good to anyone, and you'll always be reactive, and you'll have resentment and all these sorts of things that start to come in and get really ingrained over the course of your life. So this is where it all begins. It begins with dialing it up and down. So what do we mean by dialing up and down? So we talked a little bit about that with anger before. So knowing and having a word, like we said, I'm angry, but am I annoyed, frustrated, fuming, irritated, or furious? Like, you know, where on that scale am I? Even by doing that, like that, the science that said that before sort of puts the ape back in its cage, right? You're caging emotions, but you need to be able to understand. And even when you are feeling frustrated, you need to go, you can sometimes go two ways, because if somebody then continues to frustrate you, like you, I know, I'm going to use an example from you, all right?
Yes.
We're calling up to get service from a big service provider, and they said, we're going to get a call back. And so all of a sudden, you get a call back a couple of hours later, so that you don't have to wait on the phone. And then you get put on hold.
They put me on hold. They called me back and put me on hold. What the?
Right now, then.
Yeah, I was triggered.
She was
Proper triggered.
So this was, but you were frustrated, right? And what I loved, I was in the room. You were able to actually articulate that though, and be able to go this and pull it apart, and then have the conversation that you needed to have without because the person it's not the person you're talking to's fault, right? They're just trying to do their job the best they can, right? It was really good feedback. But you had a chance that you could have gone to furious. You could have just gone flipped off your tree.
I was for a bit there.
And be justified. Like, it's not about social justice here. This is because you wouldn't have got the outcome. You needed to be able to use your things to dial it back a bit to irritate it. You can be irritated, but you're in control. There's a job to be done. Let's do this and let's be better. And it doesn't matter. You don't need to go, I was right and you've caused me pain and blah, 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 blah. You need to be able to dial it down. And it's a real practical example of how to look at anger. And anger is not bad, remember. So sometimes it's actually really important to be annoyed at something. If you don't get annoyed at things that should annoy you, people just roll all over you, right? They just don't change their behaviors, right? But it's just, what happens is that people are so worried about, not, being peaceful and not worrying about fracturing other people's relationships, as they hold on to it and they suppress it and they suppress it and they suppress it until at some point it comes out as fury. And when it comes out as fury, there's all these accusations of, you don't care and you don't listen to me and you don't do things. No, you didn't deal with it when it was annoyed or irritated or angry, and dialing it back down to those irritations and dealing with it when they're just, and knowing that you're annoyed or irritated allows you to deal with it and move on. So this is this really important thing about knowing what's the appropriate level and being able to identify not just that you're angry, but that you're at a level that's bordering on going out of control, and how to dial it back just a little bit, right? And you can do this with all sorts of things. So if somebody's panicking, and just like when somebody was sad, the words they're happy in the video clip was trying to go, come on, you can be happy. This is what we need to do. We need to get around together and feel good about one another. But that didn't work, right? It had to be sad in order to show empathy and to move on. It's the same with panicking. If you're panicking, knowing that panic is a state that comes about because there's something in there that you need to be hyper vigilant about, and it feels good to be hyper vigilant, and just to be able to go, actually, I need to dial this back. I can still be a little bit anxious. I can be concerned. I'm allowed to be even apprehensive, but as soon as I get worried, panic, and overwhelm, I lose control, right? So it's about going, I'm allowed to just be concerned about it, and that keeps you in control. Someone else is panicking. The last thing you need to do is just go, just settle down, just calm down. Oh my God, that's like oil on the fire, right? What you need to be doing is to find out, what are they concerned about? What are they anxious about? And be able to go, I can see how that can be really concerning. And even sometimes use that word and go, I'm also, aware that we really need to keep this under control. What that's done to the other person is that you've heard me. You understand why I'm panicking. Okay, I can settle down because I no longer need to panic about that, right? So this is managing your own emotion, because what happens when someone else panics? I know you've got a job to be done. Someone else starts panicking. It actually gets in the way of jobs to be done, and it's like, just calm the farm, because you're now interrupting our ability to get this job done, right? And my instant there, so I'm getting angry, they're panicking, I get more angry as they get more panicky. They go, you haven't listened to me, so I'm going to panic even more and almost go into overwhelm, and now I'm having to carry the person, right? So this is not great. Whereas if I just took a moment to go, don't get frustrated, don't get irritated, dial my own, deal with me first, put my own mask on first in terms of that anger and that frustration that's coming out, and then go, I can see where you're concerned, cool, let's have a look at that. It would have been over in a couple of seconds and we would have been able to get to where we were going. So this is the complexity that sits within emotions, and I deal with that issue sometimes as well. And the same, people get scared when people are sad. and they don't know what to do. And sometimes it can be really nice if you don't know what to do, just to say, I don't know what to say, like being absolutely, honest about that. But even that word of saying, I don't know what to say, is you being fragile. That's actually you admitting sort of, I don't know what to, it's actually an expression of sadness. And you can dial it up and dial it down. I think this is a whether you're going to be in grief. When you're traveling with people in grief, it can be really difficult to know what they're feeling at any one time. So, same with anxiety. When you're scared, and knowing the difference between being scared and being anxious, they're both driven by fear. They're both fear drivers, but being able to say, actually, I'm feeling hesitant. That's a really nice word to say. I'm a little bit scared. I'm just feeling hesitant. It's not the same as being anxious about something. You're just hesitant, right? It's actually a slightly different emotion, and then obviously terrified. And knowing that what we call positive emotions, too many, as we said before, we also need to dial it back a little bit. And most people want to be peaceful. And what's interesting is that when you want to feel energized about something, usually it's a strange mix of feeling peaceful as well as feeling a little bit anxious. You need a little bit of stress in there as well, like in order to feel excited about something. So
a little bit of adrenaline doesn't hurt.
A little bit of adrenaline doesn't hurt, right? So, and this is where when you're expectant and peaceful, you can kind of see how it sort of leads into a sort of excitement, right? It's really important to talk about this though. Like if you're talking about, talk about clinical versions of depression and anxiety and things like that. What we're talking about here is a way to manage emotions before they become problems, right? Before they flip off the chart. If you've got somebody in your life or you have a problem where you're just constantly just off the chart, that's actually a time to call in the professional help and the reinforcements. There's a time and a place to be able to do that and not be scared of that, because all they'll do is they'll help you just dial it back to a manageable level where you can start self-managing again, in whatever way. Sometimes it's a therapy, sometimes medication. These emotions, you got to remember, are all, as we said before, there's physiological, there's chemical things going on. It's not always just that you're not coping, right? There might actually be a physiological issue there that may need to be sorted out in order for you to get back on track. So it's really important to be able to start to see that and be okay with doing that. That's just you dialing it back a little bit. That's all. That's part of managing emotion, right? That's all that is. So if you don't do that, you're not managing emotion and you're not going to be successful at life. It's kind of that simple. It's important to do. But it's important, this whole thing about who's pulling your levers. Is it your ape that's pulling the lever, or have you got control of the lever? And making sure that you keep control of the lever is really important. Now, how do you do that? Well, I'm glad you asked, as everyone who knew the Curiosity Show in the 90s will know well. And that's what we've done is we've gone through, and there's a whole bunch of little shortcuts, little tricks, what we call switches, to help you switch back and dial it back down to good levels when you're feeling like things are starting to get out of control. But the thing is with switches, you need to practice these when you're sort of more in control, because they're like muscles. Because remember, the ape is very reactive. So unless you've sort of baked it into your automatic system, but through practice, it's very hard to draw upon these things in the day. And practice and exercise kind of hurts, right? And you need to give it a bit of attention in order to be able to do stuff. So this is where we've got switches. Now this is why we've developed Switch for Schools, primarily to be able to give teachers and students in the moment tools to be able to develop those sorts of things. But we've also got a Switch app, which you can look about and download at any time, which gives you a lot of these things. But what are the switches we use? Well, we might be expectant that there's a time that you need to dial things up. So before we do a presentation here, we don't just want to be expectant about doing a presentation. We kind of want to be pumped. And so we like the switch that is music, and we often use music. We did just before this session, right? What when we ask people what music do you think we listen to, to hype us up, they go, "Oh, the Tiger." Or,
always get told.
Always gets thrown out there for some reason, or any of the rocky music or something that's going to G you up. No, for us, it's "Don't Stop Believing," the classic 80s song redone by the Glee crew. It's so bad it's good. So bad it's good.
Love it.
And that's right. It pumps us up. It gets us sort of, and it's almost like we've got now this neurological connection between, okay,
When
energy
we
up.
hear this song,
Energy up, right? And it gears us up. But if someone's feeling overwhelmed and panicking, we had a great story about somebody who was very fearful of needles and going into surgery. Then a good way to go from overwhelmed or panicked or even worried and dial it back down to concern is box breathing. And do we have time to go through box breathing? We don't. But this is a great switch that if you go into the Switch app, you can find. And this is just you in your mind or on the tracing a box. 4 in, hold for 4, out for 4, hold for 4, and just simply doing this over and over again 4 or 5 times. Your autonomic responses, your breathing starts to get more in control. Your heart rate drops, and your level of anxiety physically shifts. And it happens in a very short amount of time. But you need to practice this before you're anxious because you're not necessarily thinking about it. So this is the Decider Switch. Get on, download it. It's free. It doesn't cost you anything. There's a whole bunch of switches in there. You'll find 1 or 2 that work for you, and it'll have a major impact on your life. So to really to wrap up, and we want to wrap up with this short story of Robert Rubin about why it's so important to manage your rape, to tame your rape. And Robert Rubin went into the prison system, and he was looking at something different about reactivity. But they looked at 28 prisoners, and they asked the 28 prisoners, how much time did you react? Because they all said, when I murdered this person or robbed this place or did something, I flipped my lid. It's like I lost control. And he asked, how long did you lose control for? And across 28 prisoners, there was a collective 4 minutes and 26 seconds of control loss that led to 715 years of incarceration. So that's less than 30 seconds each. That's less than 10 seconds each. 10 seconds. And it translated for these 28 prisoners into more than 750 years of incarceration. So when we react, when we flip our lid, we put ourselves into all sorts of emotional prisons. We stop opportunities. We delay the development of other positive relationships. Being able to keep the peace within yourself, being able to manage that reactivity in yourself is the thing that allows you to unlock opportunity, that allows you to unlock success in life simply by being able to dial it down. I think this is a pretty amazing tool, something that I wish somebody had talked to me about years and years and years and years ago. So if you can get hold of this, you will get hold of life so much better.
And finally, if you want to learn more about your ache, we do have also a free self-assessment survey on our website. So check it out at www.decider.co, and that's co, not com, co, and feel free to answer that, and you will be emailed your results. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are out of time. We would love to hear from you. If you've got any questions or feedback, there's our email address. Check out the websites. We look forward to seeing you in our next webinar next month.
See you guys.